Chapter 1. Time on my hands. When you are sent home from prison, partway through a custodial sentence, it's with many and varied limitations on where you can go, what you can do, even who you can talk to or communicate with via social media. You might have an ankle tag on, a curfew, whatever the state decides. In my case, and although I'd quit the English Defence League more than a year before, when I came home to my wife and children, one of the stipulations that might see me recalled to prison was not communicating with members of the EDL, either directly or indirectly, which meant by Twitter or social media. I've been sent down for doing a family member a favour, and now here I was back home, still getting "We Hate Tommy Robinson" death threats, but among my many other restrictions I cannot respond to them. Couldn't even join in a public debate about whether I deserved to have my head chopped off. It meant that I had a lot of time on my hands, and I'm the type of bloke who gets bored easily anyway. It's why I probably spend too much time on Twitter letting off steam about this and that, or watching YouTube videos on my mobile phone. You can only go to the gym and run the kids backwards and forwards so much. Let's face it, if your main aim or interest is Islamic war that's being waged against the West, then there's no shortage of news either from home or abroad. As I finish this book, the November 13 Paris massacre has shaken the world to its boots. However, the world has tried to handle radical Islam so far. It hasn't worked. I use my phone to check out the web and do all my emails and social media stuff because I don't have my computer. Not since the police decided the best way to tackle the creation of EDL was to hit me and my family. By sometimes fair means, but mostly foul. No trumped up or imagined crime was off limits if it meant putting me behind bars. They can shut down my business, bank accounts, take our computers, lied in statements, lied to judges. It was anything goes if it meant nailing Tommy Robinson. As such, I don't doubt for a minute that the authorities could find a way to put any manner of incriminating stuff on a computer that I owned if they really wanted to, by way of another excuse to knock me down again, possibly finish me off. If you think I'm being paranoid, then read on. What's the old saying? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean the bastards aren't out to get you. I spent a lot of time making plans for what I was looking as a basically new life, a fresh start, once my licence period ended that 18-month sentence. But it was a period. It still is a period when there was and is no shortage of explosive, literally explosive, issues of the sort that spawned the birth of the English Defence League. I don't mind saying that I feel massively vindicated by events that have simply confirmed the fears and warnings we were expressing, albeit pretty crudely as far back to 2009, but still it seems that no one is listening. What will it take? An assassination of the Queen, perhaps? The Prime Minister? We are still seeing British Muslim men and women acting like persecuted Jews in Nazi Germany, and their effort to escape the UK and reach the supported safe haven of the Islamic State in Iraq or Syria. ISIS, to my mind, that could be a cause of celebration. Good, sod off and don't come back. And yet we have a government, politicians and liberal do-gooders bending over backwards to prevent them going in the first place, and even then trying to facilitate their safe return. Why? Good riddance. If they hate the British way of life that much, if they don't want a tolerant democracy, our benefits and tax credits, if they don't want the privileges that our state and legal system bestows upon them at the expense of non-Muslim Britons, then who are we to try and convince them otherwise? They've been allowed to set up Sharia courts outside our legal system to create Muslim enclaves that are literally no-go areas for non-Muslim people, and no government grant is too big or small to try buying their favours, to encourage them to love their so-called country. Stop them joining ISIS? We should put on special planes for them, with one-way tickets only. Why would you want your sworn enemy breathing his or her poison in your own backyard. Clearly in this country we do. The Charlie Hebdo massacre in Paris took Islam's war into the very heart of a French nation that was already tough on Muslim citizens who opposed the secular state than Britain is. And now even that atrocity has been dwarfed. At least the French had the courage to ban the face veil, the niqab, one of the first laws I believe our government should consider if it's ever serious about breaking down barriers between communities. The niqab isn't a religious necessity under Islam, and our politicians know that full well. What it is 2 fingers in the face of every living, breathing English man and woman on a daily basis. It's an up yours that shows exactly how the hardline majority Muslim community regards the rest of us. Problem is, we can't deal with the truth of it. If recent history has taught us one thing, it is that there will be other outrages like Charlie Hebdo, like the Bataclan atrocity, inevitably. Those kind of attacks, which we then saw again with the massacre of mostly British tourists in Tunisia, could have happened in the streets of Dewsbury in 2012. I failed to turn up at an EDL rally there, which as a result of finishing early averted a planned attack by 5 Muslim terrorists who, sometime later, I would have an amusing encounter with during a stay in one of Her Majesty's prisons. I think I got the last laugh on that one. Among the Muslims fleeing Britain to join ISIS, there were 2 Dewsbury teenagers, Hussein Munshi and Talha Asmal, the 17-year-old who blew himself and a bunch of innocent fellow Muslims up with a suicide bomb. Don't doubt for 1 minute that a great many of these young men and women will be returning among the floods of refugees, fully trained killers, hell-bent on reaching the paradise their death cult promises. Unfortunately, the British establishment's only plan to combat Islamic extremism seems to be to throw more and more money at the Muslim community and hope one day it might respect us, or at least, hopefully, respect our laws, and if Muslims don't, if it isn't Sharia or nothing, no one seems comfortable even asking that question, probably because they are scared stiff of the answer. And it's not just the terrorists in the midst and abroad. In the last couple of years, a period when I've been effectively under house arrest and gagged by the state, we've seen the continued scandals of Muslim grooming gangs across the country. Rochdale was bad enough. Rotherham, not even a town you would identify as being a typically hotbed of wide-scale Muslim criminality, rocked the country to its boots. More than 1,000 children systematically abused and raped over years and years, with the tacit approval, a nod, a wink of social services, counsellors and the police. It is a disgrace, and still, apart from a token resignation or 2, it looks like the real guilty parties will plod on without having their collars felt. Not the rapists, but the people who silently allowed it to happen for fear of offending a few medieval sensitivities. But because me and my mates shouted and complained up and down the land about these instances of criminal appeasement, we were boxed into a convenient far-right cage and was declared an enemy of the state. I was locked up once for trying to exercise my simple right to walk through the London borough of Tower Hamlets. No one wanted to acknowledge what was going on there, and they certainly didn't want the inconvenience of me making the point. It's taken long enough, but the corrupt empire of Tower Hamlets, Muslim Mayor Lutfur Raham, has eventually been brought tumbling down. Will he ever see the inside of a prison cell, though? Don't hold your breath. He's still part of the system. I ought to feel vindicated at all these EDL bogeymen issues coming home to roost, and our warnings proving to be not scaremongering, but well-founded fears. The fact is that I'm not, because it's blindingly obvious that still no one is learning any lessons. The latest Muslim grooming gangs to get banged up for the systematic rape of our children, September 2015, was in Aylesbury. They've gone down for 82 years. Outside the Old Bailey, the council's Jobsworthy spokesman for Children's Service admitted there were probably indications that may have been there which our staff hadn't picked up. No shit. Sherlock. The EDL demonstrated in Aylesbury to highlight exactly that. I guess bureaucrats can't hear when they've got their fingers in their ears, their heads up each other's arses.